Begin transmission. Hello, everybody. It is Chris, aka Star Raptor, here with Milton and Ben for Outer Rim Transmission episode 157. First of all, happy Father's Day to everybody out there. A lot of Star Wars dads. Hope you had a fun-filled day with the kids. We appreciate all of you out there. So, first and foremost, we're getting into the Acolyte today. We are in Acolyte season. We're getting into episode 3 called Destiny. There was a lot more Outlaws content that came out of the pseudo E3 that used to be last week with all the gaming news. And we have another update on the Young Jedi Adventures. We're going to get into all that and more on Outer Rim Transmission. I'm going to throw it over to you, Ben. How is it going, man?
Good, good. I mean, just a real hot Father's Day over this way. It was a good time, and always fun to hop on here, talk Star Wars, talk new Star Wars episodes like this each week. It's always good to get on here and discuss it. And had a good day. I actually, speaking of Father's Day of all things, my dad got me a little gift as well. He was at a store today and he found a making of the Phantom Menace book, and it's literally like it's like, it shows all kinds of like behind the scenes stuff for the Phantom Menace, like photography, just different details, all kinds of things for the Phantom Menace. And like even on the back of it, it literally says the ultimate guide to behind the scenes of the hit that was the Phantom Menace. So, I'm going to be checking out this book a lot. And so that was kind of like also my week in Star Wars as well, is just, getting this new book I'm going to be checking out this week because, it especially like it kind of fits the timeline where we're in with like Acolyte and everything. So it's just a perfect little thing I got today. So
yeah, a nice switcheroo celebrating the kids. But
yeah, I was surprised. My dad was like, "Oh, look what I found," because he was at this like Overstock store, and it's literally an old Phantom Menace book, and it was published in 2000. So
there you go, the golden age of the prequels, year 2000 to 2005. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Yeah, I mean, I have the archives hardcover, smaller edition of the original trilogy I got like 2 years ago for Christmas. Now that I mentioned it, I gotta open that up and pour over that one because I only got a couple pages in, but I was impressed because, like you said, it has like really cool photography of like scripts, even and dialogue on sheets of paper, and it's just really fascinating to get in the headspace of all that. Yeah. So go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, when I got this book, my first thought was like, oh man, this is like a Milton type of book, like these behind the scenes things. I always see behind the scenes stuff, and I'm like, oh, I bet Milton would like this sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Speaking of Milton, man, how's it going?
I'm good, man. Glad to be back on the podcast, like always. And I actually think I have that book. I have to look through my collections. I'm pretty sure I have that on my display somewhere. That did not look unfamiliar to me, and what you were saying. Just because again, as you know, I love behind the scenes, whether it's television, movies, games, whatever shows that I grew up watching. I'll read any of it or watch any of it. So that's pretty cool. But no, my week's been good. Celebrated Father's Day with my dad and some of my family. Went hiking this morning with my girlfriend. So overall, it's been a good day.
And now you're here talking Star Wars. I don't know how you could end the day much better than that, man. So here we go. Oh, man.
Yep.
Yeah, as far as me, my week of Star Wars, I will say I was really, really happy because one of my friends, this is kind of like Star Wars through osmosis and like passing on what you have learned to somebody about Star Wars, so to speak. And this is in the case of miniature games. So I have one buddy, we have a little messaging group, me and two other guys. And out of the blue, the guy goes, "Hey, look what I bought." And he bought the core set for Star Wars Legion. And then the next day he bought like the whole Droid Force box that you can buy for the Separatists. And I don't know, it was just great because I had that joy of like, I'm teaching somebody the therapeutic greatness of what it is to put miniatures together and to enjoy tangibly putting things together with Star Wars, and teaching him the ropes. Like, oh, you got to buy this glue. Oh, you should buy this kind of tool because it's going to help for this. Oh, you should use this kind of primer and use primer for. So I was basically like Yoda, like passing on what you have learned in that case, and it was just really fun. Just just talking through text messages, but it was fun to see that perspective of. Yeah, I was there about 6, 7 years ago, learning this all on my own. So here's a lot of tips and advice from things I learned by making many mistakes. Oh, that was on the wrong base. Oh, you should put this on that other base and try this tip for doing. So for me, it was like a good teacher moment that I was proud that one of my friends went out on his own accord to buy this stuff, and I'm like. Yes, you got to come see me because he lives about 40 minutes away or so. So, all right, we're gonna have to find like a game store about 20 minutes in between us, and play a game or two one of these nights. So that was fun.
Yeah, hey, I mean, it's always good to, get like you said, getting friends, like kind of, interacting with friends and like introducing friends to like those sorts of things. And like you said, it's cool, like they're getting into something that you were getting into, a few years ago. So that's always a fun experience, I would say.
Oh yeah, and then a couple things popped up at my other job. A couple clients out of the blue mentioned Star Wars things. Not even me alluding to it, but it was like one guy I train just came out of the blue. He's like, "Hey, you were mentioning the Acolyte thing, right? Last week," and I said, "No, I don't recall ever talking to you about the Acolyte." He said, "Oh, it must have been my other friend." And then this is how I always talk about it. I'm like, you don't want to get me down the wormhole of Star Wars. I said, you just open the doors of Pandora's box with me. I could talk about Star Wars. I have a pot. Anyway, so me and him were going back and forth. He has not watched any of the Disney Plus stuff, but he's watched the movies. And I was just giving him a brief rundown, but it was cool because it's like, okay, cool. And then that led into a comic book discussion. And now I know that guy reads comic books. And he was telling me about all this. So, like, there you go again. Star Wars, for a guy that I thought was pretty well reserved when I trained him. We talk training stuff. Now we can also talk other things as well, which is really fun. And then another occurrence I had with a client of mine is I was training her and I was like, this is the way to do, like, showing her a proper push-up position. This is the way. And what I do when I train my clients is every once in a while, I'll throw like a Yoda quote in, or I'll do like a Mandalorian quote or something like that to see who actually knows what I'm putting down, so to speak. And she actually picked up on me. She's like, that's from the Mandalorian, isn't it? I was like, yep. And I just had my smirk on my face. I was like, I throw those in there every once in a while just to see who's going to pick up on them. And then we got into a discussion about the Acolyte. I'm like, oh, did you watch it? And she's like, no, my brother said don't bother watching. It's not good. And I was like, oh
That's
no,
amazing.
no, that we don't want to go down the dark wormhole of the internet of all this stuff, which is we're battling with on a daily basis. But there was positive stuff here this week with Star Wars, so I'll dwell on that more than a negative.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you go on the internet, there's all kinds of things you can get into, especially with the Star Wars fandom at the moment. But yeah, there's plenty of positive stuff. Like that's the thing a lot of Star Wars fans forget about. Like just because say if you have fans, like for example, a situation like that. Just because if you completely don't like a project or something, that doesn't mean that should destroy your enjoyment of Star Wars, it's just hey, it's one thing. And there's plenty of other things to enjoy about Star Wars, so like our behind the scenes book I got, or just talking with you guys about Star Wars randomly, or like you said, talking to your clients at the gym, those sorts of things I feel like are little Star Wars positive victories, I would say people would skip over normally because they put all their eggs in whatever episode drops of whatever show versus spreading their eggs out across potential, multiple Star Wars experiences through the week.
Yeah. So there you go. Nice little opening statement. I definitely want to shout out the chat. We have an epic chat room already, and this is 5 minutes into the show, 9 minutes into the show. Shouting out Skywalker's Academy, Lowdown Show. Nice to see a Lowdown Show. It's been a bit. We also have Jesse Bennett, and we have Internet Royalty here. We have the Rayside is in the house. Hannah Rayside is in the house here, everybody. So it's great to see y'all. Just getting to the housekeeping right off the bat. We go live every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, talking about the Acolyte in the midst of the series, airing right now. But we're also available on any podcast streaming service. Search us on Spotify and on Apple Music and more. And please, on any social media site or any place where we can be rated, please give us an honest review and a like or whatever their positive marking is on there. So getting into out this week, we have a couple big ones here. Well, first of all, we have a single comic that is Darth Vader 47. We did not go live on Star Wars Underworld with the tractor beam this week, but me and Matthew will return to talk about Darth Vader 47 and Jango Fett issue number 4 this upcoming Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, so stay tuned for that. But I do have my review for the single issue on the channel now, and hot off the press, in the midst of my review for the latest Star Wars The High Republic novel, this is Temptation of the Force. I literally was recording the review right before I'm going live here on the channel, so expect that on Monday morning. That review will be out for you guys to watch, but quick impressions. I enjoyed it. It was a good Star Wars book. I will say the back half is very strong, and it is probably the biggest mic drop moment of how to end a Star Wars book with a gigantic cliffhanger you'll ever read in a long time. The author, Tessa Gratton, was basically tasked with making an Empire Strikes era kind of sort of High Republic book in that sense. So I think the mission was a success as far as like if you're looking at it from the cliffhanger perspective. They definitely have me. I want to read the next book literally right now. If I had it, I would. So great job to the team and Tessa Gratton for another good entry in the High Republic. But yeah, just check out my review. It'll be up on Monday.
And just to hop in there real quick, to throw out there, like for anybody listening as well, your whole podcast, other podcast with Matthew, that's a very good podcast for people to keep up with some of the new releases, like you were stating, just because like I always listen to that each week, actually, like whether you guys live or I'll listen to it like Thursday after the fact, just to catch up on kind of what, you guys are, what the new releases and new things are in Star Wars. Like that's always a really nice way, and you guys always do a really good detailed way about explaining things. Like I always enjoy listening to it every week, so definitely a recommendation there.
Yeah, appreciate that. But there's a lot of other Star Wars comic podcasts out there. Another one I'll shout out is Star Wars Splash Page. Those guys do a great job of not only providing critique, but they also go through and they read out the speech bubbles, and they actually get into the page and the quotes themselves. Me and Matthew, we kind of go with like a more of like what we do here, kind of like a discussion and an overarching approach. So if you're interested in what exactly our content is, it's basically, hey, here's what we thought about this story. I usually will be like, oh, I like this part, this is interesting, this image here was really cool. So we kind of talk about it from like top level, but we do get into deep, and we do go on tangents, and we do go on asides about certain things, and we do sprinkle in other Star Wars talk. Like, I mean, we like the High Republic, so we're talking about the Acolyte every week. So for other thoughts on Matthew and mine about that, go ahead. 9:00 on Wednesday nights. The comics come out on Wednesday, so we're talking about them the day they come out. So you want that first hit reaction of them, some good stuff coming down the pipe. Check us out. But yeah, appreciate that, man.
Yep.
All right, we got some other stories to talk about besides the High Republic here with the Acolyte, but we are also jumping into another High Republic story very soon. There has been an announcement of a Season 2 of the Young Jedi Adventures coming sooner than I think we expected. It's coming out in August. So, this
August
is nice.
14th, I believe.
Yeah, and they have shorts, I think, on August 2nd. It's going to be on Disney Junior and Disney Plus. I watched all the first season. I know it's not for me, of course, but I feel like I do my due diligence to at least check it out. But yeah, this is definitely something that I think is better. Not that I watch a lot of them, but from what I've heard from other parents, like this is a good show to watch with your kids. Speaking of Father's Day, this is a good one to watch with your kids because it's entertaining for the adults as well. It's not just like a dumbed down story. Like there is some fun to be had for all ages in this. Now, my only hope is please like tie this in more directly with the High Republic books. We had a comic that came out that had Nubs and Lula Talasoto and Court and all those guys from the comics. So they have been intertwining. Bel Zettifar and Lone and Great Storm were in one of the episodes or two, and they actually had Nile, although they didn't call him Nile, but I think the show is just too young to go into the Nile. But it's still good for kids. It's good to see that, hey, there's going to be more Star Wars stuff for kids that are, under the age of 8 or whatever it is. So,
yeah, it's always great seeing younger kids exposed to Star Wars. I mean, heck, today when we were over at my grandma's house visiting for Father's Day with all our relatives and stuff, like my younger niece, who's a year and a half old, all she did all day was carry around my grandma's electronic Grogu she has, and she was just so happy and content carrying that thing around. And it was just all afternoon. She took it outside, inside, everywhere. So it's always great seeing like younger audiences get introduced to Star Wars in good ways like that.
Oh yeah. So something that I'm I am more excited about this Star Wars release than any other Star Wars release, Skeleton Crew, Acolyte, anything else, is Star Wars Outlaws. As I said off the top, we had a lot of big video game news come out. Really loved the Xbox showcase. Still thinking about how awesome those games were. But they actually had an Ubisoft conference that happened just the day after we recorded last Sunday. They mainly showed off Assassin's Creed Shadows, which really can't wait for that game. Looks phenomenal. We're getting to play as a shinobi ninja and the Black Samurai. Yes, Yasuke, I think they pronounce it, is going to be a really cool addition to the franchise. But Outlaws was shown first, front and center. A lot of stuff has come out, because then after the gameplay demo, there were a lot of content creators, influencers came out on YouTube and put up like 25 minutes of footage of them playing through. I think these content creators got to play through like 3 different levels of the game. So there's a lot of first impressions, a lot of reviews. I looked at a bunch of them from some guys I watch regularly on YouTube and stuff, and overall, very positive. Very positive. A lot of people were liking this to the greatness that is the Jedi series. Like this is starting to be a new golden age kind of for Star Wars games. Like if this thing hits, it's going to be like the 3rd or 4th Star Wars game in a row that has gotten really good praise, really good reviews, starting off with Fallen Order. Battlefront 2's campaign I still think is great. Survivor was great. Squadrons was great. A lot of people forget how good the Skywalker Saga Lego game was. So, and in Hunters, I talked about Hunters last week. I still play from time to time. It's gotten its hooks in me enough to keep playing a mobile game. So that says something right there. So, yeah, Star Wars gaming, just looking at Outlaws, just the fidelity of it, I can't get over how awesome it is to see somebody going from an Imperial cruiser, jumping on their ship, getting into space, blowing up TIE fighters, going into orbit of a planet, landing on a planet, getting onto the speeder bike, going to the latest cantina, picking up a mission, then gunning down some cartel members, all in like a 15-minute period without loading screens. Like, and then getting wanted by the Empire and trying to run away from Death Troopers, all in the same gameplay loop. It looks to be really, really good. I mean, from what people have said, this thing is not going to reinvent the wheel, right? It's not going to be like the next best third-person shooter. It's not going to be the next best platformer. But everything it does well. From clambering up ledges like Cal Kestis can, to shooting a blaster, to interacting with the environments. There's a lot of fun mini games that are vital for open world games, right? A lot of these open world games, like Witcher 3 is one of my favorites, where it's like you can go and spend 20 hours playing Gwent, the card game, and hanging out and playing stuff. Same thing with Valhalla. Like, they have a lot of mini games, and there's just as many mini games in Outlaws, right? Like, you could bet on the Fathier races from Canto Bight. You could go and play Sabacc against Lando Calrissian and just chilling and getting side quests from people in cantinas and just enjoying the music. Like, this looks like a game you could really spend a lot of time on. And I don't know where this came from, but I was seeing reports on Twitter about if you were to just play through the main campaign, it'll take you about 30 hours. If you're looking to like probably spend as much time as me, it'll probably take you about 60 hours when you play through all the side quests and all that. So that is a nice size game, because when it comes to Ubisoft, they typically recently have been quite infamous for having over bloated games that might take dozens if hundreds of hours. I'm looking at you, Valhalla. You know, there are a lot of games that they've made that are just kind of like, oh, let's just throw as much stuff into the kitchen sink and there we go. We'll keep the players engaged for as long as we can. But at least with the 60 hours at the max, that seems like a nice, respectable open world game to me. Now, Ben, I know you've seen some of this footage.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on Outlaws after this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it looked good from what I seen. Like you said, I clicked around to different creators and like just clicked around videos and whatnot. It looks good. Like you said, one of the most encouraging things I saw, it was like 30 to 40 hours and then like 50 to 60 for like, if you really want to like dive into everything. Which that's really nice. And I feel like, when you see 30 hours, that's for people that are probably like really rushing through the game. So I would say it's probably for most people going to be, probably closer to, like that 40-hour range, most likely, if you just play through it. And yeah, like you said, just some of the in-depth stuff is really, really nice. Like, like the little details, like you said, playing Sabak, doing this, doing that, whatever, all the little side things, because, you just don't want a straight game where you just, like just a straight campaign. So, have those little things in there. So yeah, I'm definitely interested to, see more and more about the game, see how people are feeling about it, like when it comes out and things. I'll probably end up getting it. End up getting it probably, I don't know, probably later in the fall, I would say, or maybe in like holiday season, just because I'm going to be like in the midst of like college football just coming out and Madden and all these things, other things that I play. But Outlaws will definitely be on my radar probably, closer to the holiday season. But I'm really excited for, to hear everybody's thoughts and impressions and like, watch different gameplays and yeah, I'm excited to check it out and just see, just to really see it in depth.
Yeah, I'm excited for the stuff that they're not telling us, frankly.
Yep.
I feel like they are showing us just like the tip of the iceberg, because we know, like, what's the big heist? What is this big heist she's preparing for? We know that the rebels and the Empire are fighting it out. Like, that's what I'm really curious about. Like, maybe we see the Bothans. Maybe we actually get that story. Maybe she's helping out the Bothans get the Death Star 2 plans. That's the first thing my mind went to when they said the biggest heist ever. It's like, well, Rogue One was a pretty big heist, and that's how they got the Death Star plans for the first one. So what's to say this does not tie into that? Because in the comics, they have not even delved anywhere near what the Bothans are doing at this point. And it seems like we're coming close to the end of that storyline with the comics overall. So there's a lot of stuff they haven't talked about, which I'm very curious. Even the stuff they have talked about already has piqued my interest, such as like having Qi'ra from Crimson Dawn. I think that's going to be really cool. Getting to play around with the reputations, as they say, like, hey, if you work for the Crimson Dawn, you can double cross them, then work for the Hutts, and then the Crimson Dawn are going to send their hitmen after you, and you're going to be just doing a mission, and out of nowhere, some cartel members are going to trying to get a hit on you with their swoop bikes or something like that. That just looks like so much fun. Like, I'm looking forward to the emergent gameplay design. I look to like Red Dead Redemption 2, which is one of the all-time greatest open world games ever made, and just like I get that vibe here. Like, you're on your swoop bike just going around. The 5 different planets they've announced so far. You got a Qi'ra, which is from the Aftermath novels. I don't think we've ever even seen that on screen before. You got Kijimi from Rise of Skywalker as your snow planet. You got a Canto Bight, I guess. You got Tatooine. You have Tashara, which is their brand new Ubisoft made planet, which looks beautiful with the wind and just the different creatures there. But yeah, I mean, does something like this excite you, Milton? I know you're going to be jumping into the current generation pretty soon with the college football game soon. But would you be picking this up at some point this year, you think?
I think I will. I mean, I think eventually, just because I've always been a fan. Look, you guys know the original LucasArts brand of Star Wars games. I always like playing them. I love those open world type games that they actually did put out. And obviously, I'm still need to play the 2 Fallen Order games, which will happen. I think I'm gonna wait until I get the new generation of the system. But the games look fascinating to me, and something like Outlaws, I think with just the trailer itself, excuse me, it definitely hooked me in the sense of saying, okay, this is a different time. Well, it's what, post Return of the Jedi?
It's actually right before Return. It's in between.
Oh, right before it. Yeah, right before it. So it's like, I want to see, okay, what was going on during that time period. How do these characters interact? That type of thing. And to see that fans already are saying positive things about it, that's a good thing. And because, again, Star Wars, Lucasfilm has had an up-down history
Mm-hmm.
with games. And I think the last couple years, they've been pretty solid with the Fallen Order games, Squadrons, with this Outlaws game. Hopefully
Mm-hmm.
that will be another one in their hat. I think if we didn't get this game released, I think that would be saying something else. But I think with them showing the footage, having gameplay, and allowing influencers to kind of low key review it,
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. So they know they have a hit on their hands. So
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a game that's worth purchasing. And then I and I agree with Ben. I think with all the games coming out in the midsummer, early fall, this might be a game that I may push down the line to get just because I'll be so focused on playing,
Yeah.
whether it's college football, NBA 2K,
Yep.
Star Wars, whatever. Like it's going to be a lot. So I think it's going to be a game where you're going to have to fit it in when you can.
Oh yeah, I know. It's a crazy fall as the gamer here. It's just even World of Warcraft is putting out their expansion the day of Outlaws. I'm like, you guys could have picked like any other time of the whole year, and you put it on the same day as the most anticipated game of the year for me. Great. So that's getting pushed down the line. It's all about prioritizing. So there you go. That's the latest on Star Wars Outlaws. I'm hoping I get to play it next month. I think that they definitely had a presence at San Diego Comic-Con last year. They had like one of the fun little booths where you get to jump on Kay Vess's speeder bike. But hey, if influencers have played the game, why don't they? What's not to say they bring down maybe 20 different PCs to let the crowds play it, even though I'll have to wait in line all day to play it. But we shall see soon enough. August 26th. Is the date, I think, if you get the early access. I think it's the 30th otherwise. So there you go. Getting into our show proper, our topic proper here. The Acolyte episode 3. Destiny. Milton, I know you said right off the top that you have just watched this episode. So I'm going to throw it to you as the one that has the freshest take on this episode. What were your initial impressions, man?
All right, so before I give my initial impressions, I actually watched this episode with my girlfriend.
Oh,
And
Ooh.
because she's never seen the show, because she's like, "Hey, can I watch your episode with you? I know you need to do it before you do the podcast." I'm like, "Sure, no, let's get it done." So we're watching it, and I would say her 2 points or her 2 takeaways were this episode got her hooked, or no, it made her interested, and also she did think some of the stuff was weird regarding like the witches.
mm-hmm.
So those are my 2 takeaways from her perspective. And she's not a Star Wars fan like I am. She knows the main movies, but not like the inside baseball TV shows that we watch, if you're a hardcore fan like we are. Now, that's her perspective. From my perspective, I tend to avoid spoilers when it comes to Twitter, Instagram, because people can be influenced by different reviews,
Yep.
And I purposely waited to watch it today because I wanted to see what was being said, honestly. And of course, I'm seeing people just trash this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst thing ever. It's disrespectful to Star Wars and or to George Lucas, and disrespectful to the Force. Anything you can think of. I honestly felt, I wouldn't say the opposite. I felt that was too extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because after watching this episode, I understand some of the people's gripes and their confusion about what they're trying to do. Or was this just a therapy session for Miss Headland, that type of thing? I mean, anything you can think of. I thought it was an odd episode. It's definitely it wasn't a strong episode, but it wasn't god awful. It was, the pacing wasn't great either. I will say the pacing wasn't great for me, but it wasn't the most horrific episode I've ever seen. Like, some people were saying this was like the worst Star Wars ever.
Yep.
And I know what the worst Star Wars ever. It's The Last Jedi. This is more watchable than The Last Jedi. So I felt with the, and this is what I told my girlfriend, the biggest gripe I was seeing was people's interpretation of, the Force, and then the kids being created by the witches, all that type of thing. And I told her, and I said, listen, the witch's perspective is different from the Jedi's perspective, and it's different from the Sith perspective of the Force. Both of those organizations saw the Force from different perspectives. Okay, that's totally fine. The witches identified it as like a thread, of creation and defense and all this other stuff that they were talking about. I was totally fine with that because that's an interpretation of that. So I understood what the creators were trying to do. Did I totally agree with some of it? No. But it didn't ruin the Force for me. It didn't make me feel like, oh my God, like, they're just whitewashing the Force, or they're just trying to do X, Y, and Z, and they're pushing a narrative for lesbians and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wait a minute, like, we have the Night Sisters. The Night Sisters probably had the same type of philosophy when it comes to their interpretation of the Force and their powers and that type of thing. So from my understanding of seeing this episode, was it great to me? No, but it wasn't bad, and I understand them trying to show a different side of their interpretation of what the Force is and what the Jedi are in their perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of those points are very fair, Milton. I do think, I would say, I agree with a lot of your points. I think a lot of people, when it came into this episode, first of all, for starters, just because of, what's been going on off the field with everybody involved with the show and the Star Wars fans and everybody else involved, people came into this show, or into this episode specifically, with preconceived notions. For starters. And also for seconds, objectively watching this episode, they, like I messaged you, Chris, my first initial reaction was, this episode wasn't guilty of sending some, woke narrative for lesbians or whatever it may be. It was just guilty of being flat out boring, and there was a lot of issues with it that have nothing to do with, any of those things. Because to me, a lot of this stuff, objectively, just like cold cutting right to the point here, like, it has nothing to do with it, because like when it comes to all of this stuff, whether like a whole coven of women witches, come on, objectively, like if you fairly look at something like that in real life, there's going to be lesbians there, because it's a whole community of women, like, or if it'd be a whole community of men, there would be a lot of gay folk. That's just how it would naturally be. So like, I have zero issue with any of that. So like, I think a lot of fans came in with preconceived notions about that. And then when it comes to the whole Force thing, a lot of people were talking about that. But again, like you mentioned, Milton, it's kind of like the Night Sisters. They view the Force differently. Heck, even Palpatine uses like Sith magic alchemy. Like we've seen him do that in like Rebels and stuff. So like the magic, the magic thing isn't it's
nothing unusual.
No, it's nothing unusual. And there's plenty of that, like in Legends as well, and in canon and everywhere else. So like, that's not an issue. For me, I just think the issue with it, it really comes down to, one of my friends, Jason Ward, his summary was perfect in my opinion. His problem with this episode was, and I agree wholeheartedly, like he hit the nail on the head. The problem with this episode was, it was like an episode from a different point of view, because, we still don't have all the pieces filled in. But this episode basically was kind of like exposition from the first two episodes. We're just seeing it. And then we're not getting the answer. Like he was saying, this episode should have been the resolution of seeing the actual truth of what happened. So like, that's to me the nail in the head. Like it's stuff we already knew, but we've seen it on screen now. So like, there's that. And then for my final point, like my thing, other than just like the pacing, some of the issues of like, it's just exposition dump basically, I think we still have a lot of context. Context is key when it comes to this episode and this series as a whole. And I feel like, again, this falls on, say, the sequencing of the show. Like, maybe they should have moved this episode somewhere else in the series. Because, you have a lot of damage control in terms of, like, feedback. Like, not even from, like, say, toxic fandom stuff. Like, Leslie Headland came out in this week and said, basically, like, just wait, like, give it time, more answers are coming. Like, I saw she, like, put a quote out there, I think it was to Variety, maybe, or Deadline. It was one of those two, or I think it was Variety. But, she was talking about, like, oh, just wait, like, more's coming, blah, blah, blah. Like, all this stuff. So it's kind of like a pseudo damage control. But to me, instead of doing that, you should have just sequenced the episode a little better. So there's that. And then like my final thing on this is, again, like I said, it just comes down to context and to what happens eventually in the series, is like the forced creation of the twins. Well, the potential forced creation, because we still aren't definitively sure if it is forced creation, because they didn't specifically say that. It may have been implied, but they implied to Mother Coral, I believe her name was, that she did something to conceive the kids. But the thing is, we don't know exactly what that is. We're just assuming, since this is a coven of witches, that it's bending the will of the Force to make kids. But there could be potentially a chance. Like, what if she goes and basically kind of makes a deal with the devil? Like, say the Sith Lord, what if whoever the big bad is of the series is the one who sets this into motion potentially? Because
Right.
If they don't do that, though, if they leave it straight up as these witches creating Force kids, I'll have an extreme issue with that, because you have, Palpatine, word for word, not even including the Plagueis novel, word for word, he talks about Plagueis, having the power to like create life, do these things. And the thing is, though, to me, it's like, all right, if Plagueis, wasn't able to really do it, or like, Anakin and Palpatine together couldn't do it, we have these random witches that could just potentially create life. So does that mean, like, if you get any Force user together, like, say, for example, what if like Yoda and Shakti get together and use the Force to like coven Force powers to like bend the will of the Force? So like, are you going to start allowing like any Force users that are wanting a kid just to bend the will of the Force to create Force kids? Like, I think that's a major potential issue, but it's just a matter of time. We have to see how this series plays out to actually get the full answer. So like, that's more of like in the plausible range. Like, we just got to see what happens to do that. But if they just leave it as the Force, them bending the will of the Force to have kids, I'll have an issue with it, because then that opens Pandora's box of like, all right, why didn't, I mean, for all intents and purposes, if you want to get like really, like technical with it, like, why couldn't, anybody, like, what if Luke and Ahsoka just use the Force, not even physically, use the Force to create a kid? Like, they're both really powerful. So like, it just opens Pandora's box of a lot of logistical questions. So I have a feeling there could be something else lurking here. Like, maybe, Mother Coral like made some sort of deal with like, whoever the Sith Lord is to, use the Force to like influence things or something, like, maybe. But there's just unanswered questions. But that's kind of like my overall like just intro to this episode. I just think there's a lot of unanswered things that we're dealing with here, and it's just
Right.
like, it's just like wait and see. So yeah.
Like, I understand what you're saying about the whole wait and see and unanswered questions. And look, I understand that there will be unanswered questions, just because we're only episode 3 in. I mean, we're 3
Yep.
episodes in, so I'm kind of fine with that being, where we're at, in the sense of letting it play out, But the only thing I think I see could be controversial about this particular episode would be, I guess, not really explaining, one, I think the understanding of who these witches are, I guess their power and where they come from. Like, I would love to understand like more of their philosophy. I think if they would have gave us more of their philosophy and their background and who they are as like a coven, and then obviously play this episode out, I think I'd have been totally fine with what they're trying to do. Again, it's a very weird episode that could have been placed at another part of the season. But honestly, this could have been released with another episode. Let's say they made this episode 3 and 4 released today. It could have played better. I mean, we just don't know what next week's episode is going to be. So,
Well,
I honestly couldn't tell you at this point, what they're trying to do. And I think that's the biggest thing right here. What are they trying to do with this show? Especially now they're introducing these witches into the show.
yeah. And one thing as well when it comes to this stuff is like, like you said, it's just a little bit more maybe the backstory of them, or just something a little more explained a little better. Like you said, maybe attach this to another episode potentially. I do want to say as well, like, I think another issue with this episode is, in regards to it, isn't even like on screen. It's the way, like, some of, not to hate on reviewers, reviewers do your thing, whatever, it's your jobs. But some of the reviewers that got the screenings of the first four, a lot of them said this would be the most controversial episode, it'd break Star Wars, blah blah blah, all these things. And to me, I think, that sort of thing, that falls on, reviewers to, like, review responsibly when you're talking publicly, because people, especially waiting on a show like this, it's like, when you go out and say this is going to break Star Wars or something, all the fans freak out, and then you watch it, and if you objectively watch it with, like, no bias, this doesn't break Star Wars necessarily. Like, it really doesn't. So, like, to me, that makes me look at some of those types of early reviews like, are you just doing this to get eyeballs on your reviews versus give a hot takes are better than more neutral takes. So that's kind of like what put Acolyte behind the 8 ball to begin with, is, that sort of like buildup of like, oh, this is going to break Star Wars. Like, we briefly talked about it before this episode came out, Chris. Like, we were like, oh my gosh, like, people are saying this is going to like break Star Wars, break canon, like all this stuff. And then we watch it and we're like, well, it's not really breaking Star Wars. It's just kind of like being boring. So, like, I don't know where people are coming from, but yeah.
Yeah, no, what I'll say, my first impression of the episode, similar to you guys. Yeah, it just feels like maybe it wasn't media enough. And it's, yeah, just looking at the episode in its vacuum, I don't want to talk with my speculation too much on it. Just from my experience, it was a solid to good episode for me. It wasn't amazing, it wasn't great. It was definitely the weakest of the 3 so far. But what it did do was some really cool things that we actually got to see as viewers, right? We've heard so much from George Lucas talking about, the Jedi make mistakes and stuff, or they're not all what it's cracked out to be. I mean, look at the prequels, the biggest thing, right? It's just dogmatic ways of the Jedi. But seeing, like, showing the wide audiences out there, like, yeah, Jedi go out and they go get kids. Like, from a outside perspective, it's like, that's kind of weird. That's kind of creepy. Like, you see Soul hiding behind a tree, just spying on these girls. Oh, you didn't have that mark on you before. Like, he's taking extreme care to, like, just spy on these girls, essentially. Is this guy, like, almost like borderline predatory or something like that? It's kind of weird,
Yep.
So what this episode did well for me was expanding the perspective of things that we maybe take for granted as longtime Star Wars fans, or the new fans alike, or casuals, but also, introducing another Force sect of people, which is always fun. Going back to Rebels, seeing the Lasan that call the Force something different. Seeing in Ahsoka the witches of Dathomir using the Force differently. Now we're seeing them call this thing the Thread, right? There are so many different people, and we see this a lot in the canon books and novels, and the Falinasi and all these other people. But I mean, it's cool, and like, I agree, Milton. Like, we'd even get a name for these witches, like their coven or anything like that. I really feel like we probably should get another flashback,
Right.
because, and this is just jumping to the end. You guys can jump in at this point, because we'll just kind of talk about the episode in general. But my thought is, this is almost like the Last Jedi effect of this episode, as much as Milton doesn't want to hear that kind of analogy. But, like, the way it ends with the fire, it's like, okay, I don't think May really did the fire. I think the Jedi did. I think we're going to get another flashback later on in the season that actually shows the Jedi are responsible. So we're going to get, like, that Rochambeau, like, Qi'ra Kurosawa movie, where it's like you get, like, 3 different perspectives on, like, the same scene, like Luke with Kylo. So I wouldn't go ahead to criticize this episode too much right now. At the end of the season we can, because I think we're missing some things here that we might revisit
I
later.
agree. I think I think this episode was, if I'm being objective, it was strategically placed. I think to show us a perspective of what is being told to us. It's not like, the first two episodes they made a point to say,
Yep.
"Oh, I saw May start that fire. She killed X, Y, and Z." And of course, this episode reflects that. And it could be a Last Jedi pull where we see in 2 episodes from now, no, it actually was Soul and the floating guy and
guys,
Trinity. Yeah, Trinity. Well, Trinity and the Wookiee, they all started this because why would May want to hunt them down if she burned their whole place down?
Guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, Milton, to throw out there with your points when you're bringing that up, just so to like push you in this direction. So if you notice at the end, the floating guy Torben, his face is all scarred up and scratched up. So something happened from the beginning of that episode to the end. We don't see what happens though. His face is clear when he gets possessed by the witch, and then at the end there's like a scratch or like whatever. It looks like his face is bloodied up. So something happens.
Right.
I've seen speculation, and I can't credit myself on this. Somebody on the internet is like there's something happening between the locked doors and putting things together. Like the Jedi, they know these witches are up to good. The witches say something about they've been persecuted across the galaxy. They're going here, they're going there, and
they're almost extinct.
Yeah, they're almost extinct, and the Jedi, and going back to this whole thing creating life. The Jedi don't like that kind of thing. They don't want people to do these experiments or whatever the heck is going to happen with messing with life like that. What's to say they weren't doing some kind of summoning ritual? And the Jedi said, okay, enough is enough. You got to stop. They don't stop. And then they draw the weapons on them because they were very quick to defend themselves with weapons. And the one person, the mother, said, oh, put the weapons down. So there had to have been some kind of scuffle. And I think the Jedi just got too violent and killed them all. I don't know. Seems too likely. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I think it'll be something with the Jedi, just because, like you said, you see, we know something happens. Like also one little lamp that May uses when it burned the entire complex to the ground. Like if it is, then man, they don't have any fire extinguishers anywhere in that place. But I do think though there is something to, because the one witch who dies that we see die, or that we know is dead, is Mother Anastasia, and then the other one, Coral, we don't see her body, and she's the Zabrak, and it makes me wonder. Like I said, it makes me wonder if there's something more to that, because they're talking about how the kids were created and all this stuff. Is it it could just be implied, they were just bending the will of the Force, and the Jedi don't like when people do that. That could be the logical answer. But then again, if we do have a big Sith Lord, maybe, what if this is the Sith Lord's doing? She made some sort of deal, them really wanting kids, and they make some sort of weird Sith ritual to do it, like Sith alchemy. We've seen Palpatine use Sith alchemy before. So who's to say whatever Sith Lord is around, that's over May and potentially Chimera, it makes me wonder what they could be doing in the background, because I think there's something more to it. I hope there is. This could be me just coping with it and hoping there's more than them just creating life with the Force. But I think there could be a chance, because we've talked about it. I was thinking about this coming into this episode. Milton, I know you talked about the whole Sith thing leading into this series. We got to be getting to a point where we really get more on the nose with Sith stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because we really haven't seen it. We've seen May do some bad stuff, obviously, but we haven't seen Sith stuff that they were talking about kind of leading into this. So it makes me wonder, when we're going to really get into the meaty part of the Sith narrative. And it feels like we got to be getting close to it, whether it be the Sith being involved with this stuff with the Zabrak chick, or potentially leading into the back half of the season, because presumably we're heading into, I'd say, I would guess the next episode is going to, them going to try to take out the Wookiee Jedi. So it just makes me think we got to be getting the Sith stuff it's got to be coming either, if not this week, it's got to be by episode 5, I would say.
I feel like next week is going to be the week we're going to see like the stuff from the trailers with the Sith thing going against
Yep.
like
The
the
light whip.
sixth Jedi and the light whip. Yeah, I feel like with these Star Wars trailers, they only like to show like the episodes that people have seen. We know that critics have seen the first 4 episodes, and I feel like that's a good thing to say for that. But yeah, just to get to the episode. Let me look at my notes here. I don't have a whole lot to say. I mean, I just like the idea of like the mystery element is still going strong. Just yeah, there's some cool stuff here. I know a lot of people are getting bent out of shape of the whole like song they did.
I'll just say this. Put it nicely. Yeah, I could have done without that. Because honestly, I think the issue with it is not even like power of 1, power of 2, whatever, blah 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 blah. Like, not to feel like a Salem witch thing or whatever. But to me, I wish they would have just done it in like an alien-esque, like a Sith-esque language, like just subtitle it. All you got to do is make them like talk differently, like in like a different language, and
Right.
people don't have an issue with this scene. I just think since you're talking in English, it just comes off so wonky.
Corny.
Like it comes off corny as can be, because I don't know, like to me it was just giving me like massive like CW vibes in a bad way. Like that's like a whole scene I could see on like a CW like witch show or something. And I'm just like, man, all you have to do is give these witches, when they're doing their whole chant thing, make it all be subtitled in an alien language, and you're good. But when it's not in an alien language, I just look at it, and now every time I see, shout out to the official Star Wars account, every time they tweet Power of 2, I just roll my eyes, because I'm like, oh man, this is...
Yeah, they could have done. Listen, they had the blueprint to fix that. No, I wouldn't say fix it. They could have done it. They could have gone to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh,
and done the Kali Ma thing like that. I mean, that works perfect. Hell, I mean, that movie's been out for almost 40 plus years, and people still be doing that chant that I know. Yep. So, like, I mean, you could have easily lifted that hand to hand, incorporated that with some alien witch language, and it done. I'd have been cool with it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is some creepy stuff we're watching. Can't wait to see more of it.
Yep.
I don't know. I guess I'm the one odd man. I didn't mind it.
And look, it wasn't bad. Like honestly, it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
To me, in my opinion, it wasn't horrible. But you're right. It is low key kind of corny.
It was just kind of corny.
It worked, but it did work though. I can't say it didn't.
I'm sure I could point my way to like worse Star Wars things. Like I'm
Absolutely.
looking at Star Wars Rebels with AP5 floating in space with those like little biofluorescent butterfly things, and it literally breaks into a musical in a Star Wars Rebels episode.
Yeah.
Now that was bad. That was way worse than this. So I know people are complaining about this, but yeah, go ahead and go watch that Rebels scene. You're gonna be like, oh, this is way better than that.
Facts. Well, I just want to say this because, like, I know, again, I mentioned it early on about how people's reviews have been up, like, super negative about this episode. I mean, for example, the biggest one was who did I see? Your boy, Star Wars Theory, just going off about this episode, saying how like it was like abhorrent, it was atrocious, like it's just a slap in the face to everything that's been done. Like, and look, I know Theory in a lot of ways probably got beef with Lucasfilm Star Wars because of what's going on with whatever. But I felt that was overly aggressive, and honestly, it was just a little too much. And I just felt it was just him trying to get a rise out of the community. Like, there's no way the episode was that bad for him to make that type of reaction, which, again, he's a very influential creator in the Star Wars community, and he does preach a lot of positive stuff.
Yeah.
However, my man, like, you could have handled that significantly better, and it wasn't that bad to where I didn't feel like this episode was pushing a weird agenda about being, whether it's woke, feminism, whatever. I hate those arguments because those are so easily traps to get caught into, because people want to jump to like, oh, that's too liberal, blah blah blah. It's like, wait a minute, it's Star Wars, okay? Yes, there's politics in it, but I don't ever hear them talking about specifically one side or the other when it comes to political leanings in Star Wars. It's all about corruption. It's all about influence. It's all about consolidation of power. No, there's not one side or the left side. Okay, so stop with that. I'm just tired of these reviewers and these people going to the quick 2024 argument of politics and being woke and all this other BS, and there's an agenda.
Yeah,
it's not there. Stop it. Stop doing that.
Well, that's the thing when it comes to like all these like, you know, reviews online, like people, because like, you know, us three, we always try to like just be objective about it, like, you know, just kind of watch what you're watching on screen, like, you know, I like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff that's been said by people involved with this show leading up to the show that I strongly don't like or disagree how it's gone, but I leave that at the door when it comes to judging the show for what it is. So like, you know, I mean, even on like the other side of it, like, you know, some of the folks that like, you know, like highly will like, you know, this is like the best Star Wars ever, and I'm like, all right, objectively, it's not, or like, I mean, you know, whatever, people have their opinions and stuff. Yeah, I know that, but like, it's just like, I always try to like toss out those kind of like both ends of the spectrum takes, whether it's like, you know, like the extremely negative take that it's like, oh, it's super woke, or it's like the super positive take where it's like, this is the best Star Wars ever, and if you don't like it, then that means you're anti like woke or like whatever. Like you know, the positive folks will get really weird messaging. So like that's why, like, you know, it's nice having, you know, like you guys to talk to and other folks like you know, like our friend Hannah to talk to, because like they're, you know, it's kind of like the whole Bendu thing. Like we're kind of in the middle where it's like, okay, we kind of like cut out all that crap and like just kind of like review it for what it is versus like bring in all this other extra baggage. So it's nice having that, you know, to talk to.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like we review and we see what's presented to us on the screen. Yep. I am not, honest to God, when I'm watching these shows or these movies, I'm not thinking about, oh my God, Donald Trump or Joe Biden or the Kennedys or, you know, conservatism. Or I'm not thinking about that stuff when I'm watching Star Wars, bro. I'm thinking about lightsabers and the Force and stuff blowing up and the CGI and the storytelling and what's being said to me. That's what I'm focused on. Do we honestly feel, and I'm sure there are hidden agendas within these writing rooms. I'm sure there is, let's be honest here. But when these people are creating these shows, you honestly think they really want to say, hey, let's purposely try to piss off every male that watches the show and put two women as a lead of the show just to really piss them off. Like, come on, you know, and let's be real here. Every project in the span of time is a reflection of their current time period that they're in. Look at Star Wars in 1977. I guess it'd be 75 to 77 when it was created.
Yeah.
That was during the Vietnam War. And how the world was so different then. And Star Wars at that time lifted it out of its own depression of getting away from all that and made it an escape and made movies fun again. And also, here's the thing. They also did tie in some political things in it, but it wasn't overly exaggerated. But it still was a reflection of its time, but not to the point where people were like, oh, well, that's a weird hidden agenda. I'm not going to like it. It was just a fun movie that reflected the time that they were in. Well, that's what these projects are doing now. It's just the problem is everyone has a voice to want to be nitpicky, and that's a problem to me because it takes away the joy and fun of enjoying Star Wars or any project in particular.
Well, here's the thing, though. A lot of people forget too, Milton, is like, you know, you guys know, like we all know, like Hollywood, its entire history, you know, like you said, it's been a reflection of society, and like Hollywood's always been progressive, like plain and simple. It's always been, you know, they're always trying to like be more progressive, be more inclusive of women or people of different races or genders, sexualities, all those sorts of things. Like Hollywood's always been progressive. So like to me, like none of these things are issues because like, you know, we've seen it everywhere. I mean, go back to like the 80s. Look at what's her, like Linda Carter in Terminator, like those, like, you know, those types of things, you know, a female led action star type movie, like, you know, with Arnold, like those types of things are more progressive. Like you get those sorts of things in Hollywood. So it's not like it's like, really that big of a surprise for some of this stuff. And I think the big thing that people do forget about when it comes to Star Wars, like we're all hardcore Star Wars fans here. I mean, we're sitting here talking on a podcast in the middle of summer about Star Wars. So like we're all hardcore fans. But I think the thing a lot of folks forget is like, if this show doesn't work for you, you don't have to watch it. Like you could just stop watching it and watch the next thing. I mean, look, everyone knows I'm not a huge Andor fan. Like I watch it, because the podcast and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm in the hardcore Star Wars fans where I'll watch, whatever comes out, I'm gonna watch it regardless. Whether I'll complain about it all the way up to it and watch it anyways. But like if I was more like scaled back and say just an average mom and pop Star Wars fan, like look at the folks you talked about earlier, Chris, that the client and the brother and all that stuff, and they stopped watching it. And like, or the brother said, oh, don't bother watching the Acolyte. Like, they might just be casual fans and they're not interested, and that's fine. Like, move on to the next thing. Wait until Andor comes out. Wait until Skeleton Crew comes out, or Mando, or whatever. Like, there's plenty of other Star Wars projects. Like, you don't have to like universally love everything. And I think that's what, I really think a lot of Star Wars fans believe. Like, every Star Wars piece of Star Wars content has to be 10 out of 10 perfect Empire Strikes Back level, or it's a 0 out of 10. And like that's not the way in my opinion, to go about doing it. To me, it's just like, if you don't like something truly, then just skip it. I mean, like for me, I personally, I played through the whole campaign of the Lego Complete Saga game. Wasn't a big fan of it though. Like it was all right to me. It was fine, whatever. So I just stopped playing it after I finished the campaign. Like, it's not the end of the world. But people forget that, like, with content, you don't have to, like, it's 35 minutes or 35 minutes each week or whatever. Like, it's not the end of the world if you just skip it. Like in total, we're probably gonna have like 4 hours worth of content from this show. That's just like 2 movies. Like, skip it and move on. Like, it's really not that hard. Like, I don't know. I just think a lot of fans just get too caught up where like each episode it's like the end of the world if it's not a 10 out of 10. And I'm just like, folks, there's always plenty of other content to enjoy. Like you always recommend, Chris, like the Jedi games. Like if anyone wants Star Wars content that's good, go play the Jedi games. Like there's plenty of things to consume.
Heck yeah. Well said from the both of you. You guys say it like it is. Keep it real here on the podcast. Appreciate it, guys. Yeah, I'm not going to add much to it other than the naysayers. Sometimes I feel like some of the people out there, they just don't have a good criticism to give. They give me one good reason besides the political BS because they don't have any. Half those people probably don't even give the show a chance. They're saying these things, jumping on the bandwagon, adding to the toxicity overall. And it's a shame. It's a shame because the review bombing, people do look at that, and the average viewer goes, "Oh my gosh, it's got a 90%. I don't think I want to waste my time watching this." And it's all because of these people out there just spewing their hate. And I wish there was something else you could do with like the review rating on Rotten Tomatoes, like make it so that people get background checked or not background checked, but like you have to find a way to actually watch the show before you could rate it somehow because it's crazy.
Well, Chris, to me, when it comes to this show, like I genuinely feel, I mean, like obviously I have major critiques with this episode and whatnot, and like I really genuinely feel like this show is like on a scale, like at its worst, I would say like if you'd average the season so far, it's like anywhere from like at worst like a 5 up to an 8. Like I really don't think it's below that. And like you said, when it's clear down to like 19% or 15%, it's like it's not that bad objectively. Like it's like 5 or 6 at worst in my opinion. And like people, like you said, people review bomb it, and there's no way for them to fact check it. But then it's like then you unfortunately you have like critics will pump up the ratings. So it's kind of like, to me, they should do like some sort of like average thing between like the critics and fans, or just something to help out. Because like you said, when people see, I mean, I do it sometimes if it's a movie I've never seen before or a show, as long as I know it's not a situation like this where you're gonna get review bombers, I'll go and look up the Rotten Tomatoes score for some random thing to see, oh, it's like a 79%. Okay, I guess I'll give it a try. But I've done it before where if I see, oh man, this is like a 21%, I'll probably like skip it to another day or something. Like, that is a real thing, even for like people that are really in the know like us, because your time's valuable and you want to find out what to watch or what not to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, so speaking of scores, I think it's time to give our scores and our review for Acolyte Season 1, Episode 3, Destiny. I'll throw it over to you, Milton, for your final thoughts and score out of 10.
Yeah. Again, like I mentioned, I thought this episode was not horrific. It wasn't trash, like the other people were saying. It was definitely one of those. I wouldn't even say controversial. I think that's unfair. I think it was just a very confusing, odd episode that was placed. I thought there was things that could have been explained a little bit differently or more in depth. I think the word you used, Chris, was it meaty? It wasn't meaty enough or something to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'd have made this maybe an extra 10 minutes or just given us more in-depth understanding of who these witches are, what their role is, what they're trying to accomplish. I think it would have given this episode, I think, more. It would have been given us more of an understanding of what they're trying to accomplish with these girls and how their background ties into their future or their current timeline. So overall, I thought this episode was okay. I would give this probably a 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm right there with the Milton. I'm also going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. I think that this episode, it just doesn't have enough depth for a new organization. Would have loved to get a name, would have loved to get a little bit more backstory. But it did really good things. It just showed the weirdness of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. It showed the threat as a different version of the Force that people can channel. It shows witches in Star Wars doing crazy chants, which is weird and cringe as it sounds. It was kind of cool just to the mythos of Star Wars. This had a lot of mythos of Star Wars. I appreciate that. Just overall, like, cool little things like, hey, they're doing the episode 1 Anakin training thing with the screens, with trying to call things out and the drama with that. So just all those little nuances here and there. There's a lot of good, but there's also some things I didn't like. So I think there's hope for this series. I'm still, as ever, engaged, especially going into this next episode. What about you, Ben? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's a point we haven't brought up yet on the podcast, guys. And I definitely I'm glad you mentioned that, Chris. The test scene with Soul and Osha was genius. Like, that scene was very, very clever. Like, to me alone, if someone gives the episode a 0 out of 10, to me alone, that scene at minimum is worth 1 point at minimum to get you to 1 out of 10, because, like, it was such a good, clever scene. She was trying to lie to Soul, and then Soul's telling her correct, and she's like, wait, I'm trying to lie, basically, and you're telling me I'm getting it right. So, like, I thought that was a very, very clever scene. But yeah, I think overall, though, this episode, to me, like, it has its issues because it's a lot of things we've known already. Like, this should have been the resolution to all of these built up histories, like, versus us seeing like a Rashomon version of the events. Like, I would have rather us just seen the resolution of what really happened and then kind of move on from the flashbacks to, push forward into the present. So with that, combined with some of the, the other issues I have with the episode, I think creatively they should have, subtitled, like, with the alien voices or something, as with the witch chants. And then even, like I mentioned, I just think overall the episode was kind of boring as a whole. As a viewer, I just think it was just kind of whatever. And then, when it comes to the different characters in the episodes, Lee Jung Jae is always great as Soul.
Oh yeah.
And, I'm interested to see where they go with his character and what ends up happening. And the thing is, though, I really think, to me, so for me, this episode's kind of an asterisk. Like, the episode could be a 6, I would say, but I have to give it a 3 for the concern of, like, what really knocks the episode for me is the concern of the forced creation of kids. Because, like, if, like I said, who's to say, like, why couldn't any of the two strong Jedi members in the prequel trilogy, hey, we need more strong Jedi, like, why don't we just get together and do some seance and, create the next, coming of Force being like that's my issue with it is it opens Pandora's box for, are we going to just start manufacturing Force kids? So I just got to wait and see how it's going to be. So for now, the episode is a 3, but if they actually give us a fine resolution, later in the season, it would be a 6. But yeah, I'll have to give it a 3.
All right, so we got a 6.5, 6.5, and a 3 out of 10 compared to last week. Our openings were all a little bit higher. Over there in the chat, we have John Pedro, who is claiming that this is his favorite episode. So there you go. It's great to see the different perspectives, the different takes on the episodes, because while it's not ours, it's somebody else's favorite episode. So it's great to see quality in other people's eyes and all that good stuff. So there you have it. That's our review of Destiny. Come back next week as we review whatever the title of the next one will be for episode 4. And thanks everybody for joining us for another rousing episode of Outer Rim Transmission. We had a very lively chat room. You could join us every week at 7 p.m. Eastern here on Star Raptor YouTube channel, and you could look us up, Outer Rim Transmission, on any podcast streaming service of your choice. Please rate and review. So Milton, plug your stuff, man. Where can the people find you?
You guys can find me on X at Milton Weber 7 or on Instagram at Milton7Weber. I appreciate everyone listening and watching every week. It's really nice to have an active chat when they're asking questions or just interacting. So please continue to support, continue to share the podcast with your Star Wars friends, your family. I want to obviously grow Chris's channel some more. So please continue to share and just give us a shout out. So thank you guys for watching and listening.
There you go, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a great time hopping on here, talking Star Wars. It's always a fun time. Like you said, Milton, anybody who's listening, feel free to share it. And it's always fun, like chatting and seeing what people are saying in the chat about these episodes. So yeah, you can find me talking Star Wars on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else at RealBenMaynard. And one thing I'm for sure going to be talking about tonight is House of the Dragon here in less than an hour. So the countdown is on for the new show, so I'm very excited for that. So that's what I'll be talking about tonight.
Yeah, the main thing here, and this is a big one for me, is this show has me most excited to get on here on Sunday nights to talk about the episodes, because there's a lot to talk about. Like, this is a different kind of Star Wars than we're used to. It gets us on here to discuss. Some people... This is my therapy for the episode, if you will, where it's like, all right, I had some issues, but I like some things. So more than any other Star Wars series, I think Bad Batch was very good because we were all like positive, like on every episode, and there was a lot of good vibes. But there's positives and there's negatives to this one, so it's nice to kind of talk it out. So really, this is why I really like doing the podcast for something like this,
Oh yeah, like that's one great thing about hopping on here, talking about Star Wars every week, because it lets us all like vent and talk things out, and lets people in the chat or people listening after the fact kind of like maybe get a different perspective on things, because like we mentioned in the stream earlier, I think Milton mentioned it, like we're always giving like pretty fair criticisms here. It's not like we're bringing in like outside stuff. We're like only critiquing the content, which that's rare nowadays, honestly, when it comes to different creators. So, it's nice to be able to hop on here, critique the content, have a good discussion. I mean, look, we've had plenty of times before where, any of us three, we were like, oh, well, we came into the episode, viewing it as like a 7. And now after like talking it further, we have it up to like an 8, potentially, like after we break it down further and like get a different view on it and stuff. So like, I mean, that happened to me several times, with like Andor, for example. Andor, I was coming in with like 4s, and like Chris would talk me up to like a 6 or something. So, it can happen. So it's always nice just getting kind of like a different view on things each week.
Yep. Yeah, Joshua Rittenhouse, thanks for the awesome sentiment, man. Nice breath. He's saying a nice breath of fresh air from all the YouTube haters out there. Great show, guys. So,
thanks.
This is why we do this show, right? We love to talk to you guys. Love to get on here with level-headed fans. I always talk about we're building the positive Star Wars community here because you guys truly are the best positive Star Wars community on the internet. I get on here and it's just great seeing old names like Lowdown Show jumping in for the first time in a bit. So again, happy Father's Day to everybody out there. We'll see you here, same place, same time next week, Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern. May the Force be with you always. End transmission.